As always, a huge thank you to Starboard, who are once again this season's main sponsors. Starboard has a history of innovation across water sports, starting in 1994 by revolutionising the design of windsurf boards, and they've brought that bang up to date recently, bringing foil windsurfing onto the Olympic stage with their IQ foil package. Starboard got behind stand-up paddleboarding in a huge way in the early days and continue to lead the industry to reduce their environmental impact. Their focus on innovation brought them 7 world champions at the ICF Worlds last year, and all of them were using their Lima paddle range. They continue to improve and innovate their boards and their paddles for all abilities across all flavours of the sport, including adventure. And you can find out more about Starboard through their website, which is linked to in the show notes. Welcome to SUP FM, the sport's leading podcast, where we speak to inspiring people from the fastest growing water sport in the world. Our aim is to help you maximise your own experiences of stand-up paddleboarding and to deepen your love of the water as we chat with people from both inside and outside the SUP world. Every episode is designed to inspire, support and provide you with a deeper immersion through my conversations with leading athletes, scientists, adventurers, TED speakers and New York Times best-selling authors. If you like what we do, there are plenty of ways to support the podcast, including telling your friends, following us on social media. You can even buy me a coffee on Patreon, or you could leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, which will help others to find us. Whatever you can do, we appreciate it. This episode is part of our Yukon 1000 mini-season, where we do a deep dive over several episodes into the ultimate adventure race challenge and the longest paddle race on the planet, where we'll talk to the race organisers, teams and individual paddlers in the lead up, in the start town, just ahead of the race and after the finishing line, closely following what many describe as a truly epic odyssey of a race. Well, a huge welcome back to the show. Our last Yukon episode was the immediate take following the end point of the race's journey, and it's now been a few weeks since we last heard from them. All the racers are back home in the UK or from whatever country they call home, and that's given everyone a bit more space and hopefully a bit of time to digest and to recover and reflect. So this episode really brings our season's coverage of the race to a close by getting some details on the reality of that experience. So whether you're listening to this as an armchair adventurer, whether you're planning your own adventure or you're planning to take part yourself in the race in 2024 or another year in the future, we'll hopefully have something for everyone in this chat. So I am rejoined by the 2 SUP teams who successfully crossed the finish line at the Dalton Highway Bridge in Alaska, which is well inside the Arctic Circle, having completed the Yukon 1000 race this year, which started in Whitehorse, Yukon Territory, Canada. We have Martin and Kim from the Renegade Moose Chasers, who finished the race in an incredible 9 days and 7 hours. Hey, guys.
Hello. We're still here.
Excellent. Well done for surviving. And of course, we've also joined by Craig and Skip of Team Shac, who stayed ahead of the pack for more than half of the route to complete the race in 8 days and 13 hours. What an awesome effort. All of you guys put in. Congratulations, first of all, on completing a cracking race and really flying the flag for British SUP. It was quite amazing to follow. And as part of this episode, I've also collected some questions from people who've been following the race and the season, and we're going to put those questions to you later in this chat. But first of all, I just wanted to say it was something that seemed to attract a huge amount of interest. And as one of those who followed the race obsessively throughout, it played a pretty leading role in my psyche over the 9 days we followed your progress. And there were plenty of people checking the feed obsessively over those 9 days. So I just wanted to start out by asking if you had a sense of that interest since you've been back. And Martin, I know we had a brief chat last week, and I know you've already been papped, haven't you?
Yeah, I got papped about 2 days ago at the campsite that we run Well, that was quite remarkable. A lady walked into the coffee shop. I was serving coffee, and she just looked at me and she went, "Oh my God, I are you him that's just done the Yukon on a Curok board? I've got a Curok. I followed you all this time. Oh, you're amazing. Can I have a hug? Can I have a picture?" So yeah, I got tapped. It was really cool, actually. It's been a while.
There you go, fame at last, Martin. And Skip, I know that you were sort of catching up quite a lot after the race on the social media. I mean, what was your sort of concept on the amount of following? Because there are plenty of people following and commenting.
Well, actually, I don't get onto the social media. I'm a bit of a social media whore in the sense that I kind of just do my stuff and don't look at anything else. But I did have an interesting experience the other night. I went to the golf at Walton Heath and ordered a taxi to pick me up. And the taxi driver knew who I was because of the Yukon.
Amazing.
It was just bizarre. It was really bizarre. He was just, same as Martin, really, to some extent. Oh, I know who you are. You do? Yeah, you've just done the Yukon. I have. How do you know this? So yeah, unbelievable.
And what I like about this is that Walton Heath is on an international podcast.
There you go.
It was the Women's Open.
Fame at last, and obviously that was helped. Martin, your profile preceded you, but there was also Ashley Kane, who did a bit of drumming up interest early doors, and certainly he sort of featured in quite a bit of the social media, and there was a lot of interaction with all of his fans. I mean, he had a pretty tough experience, particularly at the finish line. I don't think he had one working limb at the end of it, but what was your experience of paddling with him as a member of the collective?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, we knew that he was drumming up a lot of interest outside of what would be a traditional following for such a race, which is obviously great. When you're actually in Whitehorse, you don't really pick up on that. I think it's more. I think John, as a race organizer, John was telling stories that he would turn Skylink on each morning just to check in on social, and he would be influxed with 500 DMs on his Instagram account from Ashley's followers asking how he was getting on and stuff. So I think probably the organisers had more during the race. Skip and I, the only interaction we really had with Ashley and Gary was just coming into the flats. They caught us just as we were going into the flats, and we spent a really nice kind of like 5 minutes having a little natter, which is great. And what was interesting then is we were just coming into the flats towards Circle, and Skip and I had made a decision at that point that the mapping we had was going to take us left right up to Circle. And I knew that. I was like, that's wrong. The point that you don't go left to Circle, you kind of stay right.
Everything's right.
But we got to a point. We had our chat, and off they paddled, and they just went straight left and disappeared off the Circle. And Skip and I, we carried on. We had a couple of nightmares and grounding out, and then we popped out, and they were behind us. So we enjoyed having a little wave again at that point. I think any exposure outside of the normal channels that this race and our sport gets is hopefully going to be a positive one.
Yeah, absolutely. And we had a few posts that went absolutely gangbusters. One that was very popular was the one that was put out there by Fortune Favours the Brave, all of you guys setting off. So I'll ask you about that experience of setting off from Whitehorse in a second. But the other one was a story about Ashley Kane and that photo of him under that orange sky. I'm sure you've seen that one. I put the commentary from Fortune Favours the Brave behind that on a reel, and I think we clocked up about 75,000 views in 24 hours. So there's been a huge amount of exposure. But you've beaten that all by your papping and your experience there, guys. If people in Walton, if fame has reached that far, then that's quite amazing. So anyway, we've got a lot of ground to cover here. So let's start from the beginning. We obviously got some messages from you guys at the start line. And as I said, our friends and yours, Nick and Dan from Fortune Favours the Brave canoe team, sent us some great footage of you setting up off. So how did that feel Craig setting off finally? Because this has been so many years in the offing. I mean, was it just impatient and thank God it's arrived, or were there any feelings of trepidation? Was it adrenaline? How did that feel?
Probably a bit of. To be honest, it was probably in the moment was less stressful than I thought it would be. I think for all of us. I know Martin and Kim had some challenges with taxis picking them up from their hotel, which probably set them off on the wrong thing. But I think that aside, I think once I'm not speaking for all four of us, but I get the feeling we kind of there is obviously adrenaline going, but you're trying to keep calm. Things become very much about the next minute. You try not to think too much ahead, and you certainly don't start thinking about necessarily the full details, or I didn't, of what you're about to do, because I don't think that would really help at that point. At that point, you're really just trying to make sure that, have I tied down the board properly? Have I put the fin on? Like silly little things like, is my leash in a place where I'm going to be able to clip it on easily enough? So for me, it kind of got very granular, just like thinking through each thing and trying not to get too caught up in the moment, personally. But it was probably the biggest anticlimax of a race start that anyone's ever going to see. Because, no one wants to trip over on the start line. No one wants to drop something and no one wants to get on the board and fall off in the first 20 meters under all the prying eyes. So I think, I don't know about you guys, but you get the blessing and you get the countdown and it's go. And I think we always kind of trundled off down to our boards.
In all fairness, Craig, we did actually all run to the boards.
I didn't. I had no shoes on. I definitely didn't run.
Yeah, you Neanderthaled it out.
I sauntered, yeah.
So it was a Le Mans start, was it? Or theoretically?
Not by me.
Yeah.
Maybe Le Mans start in slow motion for about 20 feet. Yeah.
Well, it's 1,000 miles, and if you've got to sort of go 10 yards to the board, it doesn't make sense to sprint down there, does it? Really? But
always makes sense.
No, I disagree.
So Martin, you what was your start like? I mean, do you echo what Craig said? Was your adrenaline spiked by the experience you had with the taxi? I mean, I haven't heard that story.
Well, yeah, we were just on high alert because we booked a taxi for 6 a.m. We were starting the race at 7:30 a.m. We had a 5-minute drive. The taxi didn't arrive. So we were standing outside of our accommodation, all bags and ready to go. And thankfully, I managed to get hold of Chloe, Craig, because we couldn't get a taxi. And she managed to raise a taxi for us. But anyway, bundled into a taxi. And we arrived there probably with about 55 minutes to go. And that included pumping up our boards, getting everything ready, putting it all on board, making sure we'd done everything correctly in a really, really short, stressful space of time. So that wasn't so clever. But when we did get our boards on the water and everything was packed and we were ready to go, one thing that really, for me personally, I can't talk for Kim here, but one thing that really helped me out was stopping and having the words from John. That really settled me, and also the blessing from Glenn. I think that was highly potent for me. That one, in fact, both of them were, and I believe for me personally, can't speak for Kim, but they really helped me sort of blinker me into what I was about to get into.
It was a First Nations blessing, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. Correct. Yeah. It was a wonderful, wonderful blessing. He said some very poignant words just to the four of us. We all got given a little pouch with tobacco in it, because tobacco in First Nation culture is highly respected and valued. And so we all got a little pouch of tobacco, which I still have, obviously. And then we got asked to nip a little piece of some tobacco into our hand, and then each of us individually went down to the water to make our peace with the river and our craft in whatever way we felt needed. And then we put the tobacco into the water, and that was kind of after that we were focused and ready to go. Yeah, so that really helped settle me. I mean,
it was a very special moment,
very spiritual moment.
Yeah, very very special.
And Kim, just in terms of these sort of long journeys, obviously you're no stranger to these sorts of long expeditions, particularly on your bike. I suppose what Craig said about, just thinking about this next moment to the next, if you think about how far you've actually got to go, it could potentially really intimidate.
Yeah. You just sort of have to sort of take it in stages, I think, really. But this event was a lot different to what I've done before because, one, I was doing it with Martin, with somebody, which have been on my own. And two, I was never really up against the clock. It was all, in my own time frame. So being against the clock sort of does add a lot of pressure. But you
beat the clock. So fantastic. So obviously you set off. The first major obstacle was Lake Le Barge, which is a huge monster, and it's renowned for having different weather conditions at different sort of stages of the lake. But watching the coloured dots move as I did, it looked like that you sort of progressed through that relatively quickly, or not potentially as badly as I've seen some people have. Just tell us about Lake Le Barge, Craig.
I mean, we were very lucky in as much as we had a very subtle, slight kind of tailwind. It was clear. But that said, you also know that it can change so quickly. I mean, I think having done it, and I think Martin, having done the Great Glen, would probably, and also Kim, I think something with the Great Glen is, it kind of reminds me quite a bit of Loch Ness, actually. It's very similar distance. You can kind of see both sides pretty much. You kind of know it can change at any moment. I've done Loch Ness when it's been flat, and then halfway across it's whipped up. So I think you're thankful for the conditions at that exact moment, but you're also really mindful that it could change at any time. So you kind of make hay while the sun shines. Was my feeling. It's you don't feel like you're making progress again because you can see because it's so clear. You can pretty much see the end from when you get on it, as in you can see a mountain range.
What you think is the end.
Yeah, and you're using points on the bank to see how close you're getting to something, and you're aiming for a headland, and 3 hours later, you're not at that headland, and you get around that headland, and you realise there's another 10.
There's another range of mountains that you're looking at.
Yeah, so I think we were all blessed with the conditions we had. Having seen footage from other years, it could be so different. So I think we were very thankful for that. But yeah, it was you're just always kind of on your guard. And then the funniest thing, and I think Martin and Kim will have exactly the same experience, and no matter how many times the organisers tell you that, like, when you get to the end of Lake Le Barge and you're looking for the entrance to the Yukon River, this mighty river that going to the Bering Sea, this beast you've been told about, it's like you get to the top corner and you can't see the damn thing, and you're following a tree line, and then Skip and I thought we had made it, and we stopped and had a little bit of celebratory we've done it, and then realised we still had another 2K to go, and carried on a bit further. And then when you finally get to it, it's a tree line, a bank, and you kind of come around the corner, and it's just a little tiny entrance to a river, and you think, is this the gateway to another 900 miles of of hell or fun, how you want to look at it. And I think that was really interesting because you kind of you pull back into the Yukon, and it's correct, and it's the 30-mile river it's called from there, and it does speed up again, and you start to feel the pull. But it was really strange. I think having such a big body of water to cross over, it took us 8.5 hours or whatever to cross it, and you're looking for this tiny little almost inlet, which is again the gateway to what we saw for the other 920 miles.
Yeah, there's huge distances involved, and we've talked in previous episodes about restriction in tech. I just wanted to understand, I mean, I think I know the answer to this, but just wanted to understand how you got a sense of the mileage that you were covering. I assume you had Garmin's or something similar, or did you just rely on the maps?
No, I think we had we had a Garmin watches. So we had our paper maps, which we had made ourselves, which had a track on there, and they also had every kilometre marked as dots. We had our Garmin watches, which were tracking obviously what we were doing and used throughout the whole race. But then I had a Garmin Fortrex tracker GPS unit between my feet, and effectively that sole job was to tell us our current speed. Mm-hmm. It was basically like a car speedo. So that's what we had for tracking. And the idea was that if we weren't sure where we were, but if our watch said we were at 270 kilometres, we could go to the 270 kilometre mark on the map and find ourselves within. So it's a lot quicker than using grid references. Obviously, over the course of 1,000 miles, that slips. But I think by the end of it, though, we were still only about 10, 15 kilometres out on our watches from our maps. So we had that as a way of just reassuring ourselves and also helping us find where we were. And the speedo was the most invaluable thing. It's a piece of advice. Number one is, a speedo you can look at while paddling. It's invaluable, absolutely invaluable, as Martin realised after day 5.
Well, tell that story. That's a great lead-in.
I don't know that story. What?
I think it's Martin. I wasn't dropping you in it there, Martin. I think it's more about, as we know, as Brits with not much flow on the Norfolk Broads or the River.
Right. Yeah.
It's like there's a lot of learning on the job, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think our experience of distance and speed was very much different. I mean, we had, same as you, we had a Garmin. Because Kim and I basically just bought the same stuff in the end. We both had a matching pair of Garmin 86i Marine GPSs, and our mapping had our digital mapping was mirrored in our paper mapping with kilometre grid squares on the mapping. So we kind of did well again. Yeah, from me, we had 10 days. When you set off, you have 10 days to cover 961 miles or whatever it is, depending how you go. And I kept saying to Kim, I said, right, at the end of day 3, it needs to have a 3 in front of it, and it needs to be north of that. On day 4, it needs to have a 4 in front of it. It needs to be north of that. So when I'm a little bit more simplistic in that view, because that's the actual reality of the situation, isn't it? I was constantly doing maths in my head. And that's actually one thing that kept my brain active throughout the whole journey, was doing math problems in my head. I was working out.
When did your head give up on that?
It didn't. Honestly, it didn't. In fact, it probably became more and more focused towards the last 2 or 3 days, because, that's when whether it's going to work out or whether it's not, so
we struggled to tell the time or work out the hours at some point. So you did really well to do that.
I mean, I know, you guys were ahead, and I knew there was absolutely no way we were going to be catching you. But I
wish we'd known that.
Well, the battle then became, we need to get it in the cut-off, and that was all that mattered. So math problems for me was, because, like as Craig said, I race a lot. I'm constantly working out in my head distances versus speeds versus time. So I had a good inkling, as to how it was going to work out, certainly towards the end. But nothing that complicated really. It's quite simplistic, just maths. Makes me sound clever, but I'm not.
Yeah, that sounds more complicated to me, definitely.
You should say that, because obviously the pace that you go at is dictated by the water flow, and you could really see by the sort of record performances and the winning performances in previous years how that affects the overall time. So 22, unfortunately, the year that you weren't able to compete, Craig and Skip, that was a bit of a sort of a fast year, but I guess that makes it difficult to sort of target the amount of mileage that you're going after. So I would imagine you just set your targets by hours, don't you?
You never look at previous years. I mean, you can never compare. It's the same location, but there's no comparison.
The river's very different year on year, isn't it, Craig?
Yeah. And we all know it's not just the water flow. Funny enough, I was watching a video today, obviously with some of the documentary content we're getting. And what I didn't realise is the people that know the river will do a different route depending on whether it's a low, mid, or high. So some of them have got 3 choices, and if they know it, they know it. We're 4 guys from the UK that have done our best with a bit of mapping software as well. So I think you can't compare previous years. You'll just be, as Martin said,
your race.
Yeah, you've got to race your race, and you are doing the math in your head. Unlike Martin, it got harder for us. but what is interesting actually is the clarity. As Martin helps you found clarity of numbers. There is a strange thing when you're really tired and you only have a certain thing to focus on. Sometimes you can be clarity can come in strange times. Martin found it in numbers. I found it with kind of mapping and looking at maps and just being logically where we were and stuff. But yeah, it's every year's different beast. So as Skip said, race your own race.
Okay, so day 2. The rest of the fleet started. You were heading through the Carmacks, and that night, I think Team Shac, you made it just past Five Finger Rapids. And from what I saw on the tracking, you'd found an island just sort of beyond that spot to camp
best
on.
Campsite of the whole trip, one of the best.
Well, that was going to be my next question, because I would have imagined that would have been a pretty spectacular campsite. So that was definitely it for you guys, was it?
I mean, it was a spectacular evening for us, actually. I think, the Carmacks to Five Fingers stretch was a really interesting one for us. I mean, when we came into Carmacks, it was bizarre because but we had been to that same spot and camped on that campsite last year and seen some of the racers come through. And when we approached it, the banks of the river were lined with people cheering at us, which wasn't the case last year, so we weren't expecting it. It was just like, what the hell's going on here? Really, 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 really bizarre. But it turns out Glenn and Maureen had kind of whooped up the interest within the campsite and got everyone to the riverbank. And so we went through Carmacks, and then out the other side of Carmacks, Craigie, I think you had an off.
Capsize. I had my first capsize.
Yeah, first capsize. So that stretch then was about, we know where we are. We know we could get to Five Fingers at this point. Do we go for it based on the fact that we've had an off and blah, blah, blah? And it's getting late and you've got to hit the target times and all that stuff. And after quite a long discussion around that from the pros and cons point of view, from a safety aspect more than anything, we decided to go for it and get through Five Fingers that night, which we did, which was great. That was a real kind of tick in a box for us. Five Fingers on second day is a good accomplishment as far as any racer is concerned on the race. And when we got to the other side of it, we knew we were going to come into camp. So warming up, and that was all. If we'd come off, we would have been going into camp and warming up. So it was the right decision in that moment. Equally, it's lighter at midnight than it is at 4 a.m. And the reason I say 4 a.m. is because we would have had to stop before midnight to not go through Five Fingers, so about 10 o'clock, which meant we would have had to leave at 4 o'clock. And I'm getting the maths now, Martin. It's coming to me now. I don't know where it's coming from, but we decided to go through, which means we actually landed into camp about 11:30, and we knew we were going straight into camp. And we were really lucky because it was a beautiful campsite with beavers slapping their tails around, and was there signs of bear? I don't think there was signs of bear, but there was moose prints on that campsite for sure. And there was
a rabbit and a random
rabbit. The rabbit. Yeah,
rabbit.
Just sat there, calm as anything, as we did all our things on the beach. He just sat there and watched us. It was brilliant. Yeah, great campsite.
And then we ate him. No, we didn't.
And what about you guys? What was your camping highlight, or were you just mission focused, tents up, food on, into bed, into the sleeping bag?
Pretty much that, actually. I mean, we didn't go on a Team Shac holiday camp, which is what that one sounded like.
It was all a holiday.
No, I mean, I think, I think
decent.
Yeah, I mean, do you know what? The whole blinking place is so beautiful that it's very hard not to have a good campsite. I've got my favourite camps, but I think on day 2 we camped just outside of Carmacks because we didn't quite make it to Carmacks. And it was probably the worst campsite we had because we had to portage all our kit it looked really accessible. But what you find with a lot of the little islands is that the little islands, but you can't actually, because we've got a fin on the boards, you can't actually get to them. So you can actually get within around about, I don't know, 20 meters of it, but then you're having to walk the rest, so having to pick up all your kit and walk it to the island. But I think every single island we went on certainly had moose prints on it, which was cool. I've got some photos of my foot next to a moose print. And let me tell you, mooses are huge. They are big bits of kit, and then I think that we had another camp, didn't we? But yeah, we went on this other campsite. And of course, when you get on the campsite, you've always got to check it out. You've got to check it out for fresh bear prints, fresh sort of bear scat, whatever. Got on this campsite, walking around. We thought it was okay. Then I actually found some bear prints on the campsite, but I think they were about a week or two old. So I thought, fair one, let's just camp here. It's all good. So yeah, we had some amazing camp. It's like I said, it's hard to get a bad campsite whilst you're there because everything is just 100% beautiful. My favourite site was in the Arctic Circle, probably on around about day on our last camp. Actually, that was probably my second to last camp. Maybe those two were my favourites up in the Arctic Circle.
The cabin was cool.
Oh God,
Apart from mosquitoes.
Yeah,
stayed in the
we actually, we stayed in an Airbnb. No, we came across Glen Creek Cabin. Have a look on the mapping for Glen Creek Cabin. So it's sorry, I'm waffling on, but it was amazing. It was a public use cabin. It was in the flats. It was, I think, maybe just before. Don't know, can't remember. But it was this beautiful, proper, traditional log cabin. And you arrived at this cabin. Hopefully nobody's already in it. You open up the door. There's a bear door. Then there's a mosquito door, and you get inside. And there was 3 metal framed beds. There was a little kitchen area where you could do your kitchen stuff. What's going
on here?
There was a log burner that you could have put your granny in. It was just huge. There was a long drop toilet. Oh man, Craig, I think I might have actually submitted that footage. So go find it. But yeah, with the log cabin was amazing.
It had beer.
Wow, I wasn't expecting that. That's
neither were we, Simon. To be fair,
yeah.
I'm going to send you all the video I took of it after this call. So and then you can all get proper jealous.
Yeah, or not.
It was allowed in the rules of the race.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you basically had 6 hours, didn't you? And we talked about this again in the previous episode, and that's not a long time to get yourself all sorted and fed and rested. So Team Shac, first of all, how did your process develop over time? Did it get looser? How did you manage that?
It got loose. So the comparison, day one campsite. We go to day 2 campsite. Day 1 campsite was horrific.
It was shit.
Very similar to Martin's and Kim's, where we had to portage across stones. And anyway, day 2 we obviously had our just after Five Fingers, but there you pull your boards up. You get your bear spray out. You're walking around. You're analysing every print and trying to guess its age. And trying to make a decision and looking for scat. And you've got a knife nearby. Like, what would that really do? Day 7. You pull up, you take a glance-through look around, and you fall asleep on the floor.
Yeah, I think I'd lost bear spray by day 5.
Yeah, you're basically like, if a bear wants me, you can have me. I stink of it. You don't want to eat it. I had great faith in the smell of 8 days not getting undressed.
I'm glad you didn't say the smell of me then, Craig.
No. So I think, yes, I think it does adapt over the time because you work out things that take a bit. On paper, it sounds that it should be really quick, but the longer it goes on, the more time-consuming, basic, simple tasks take. Skip was amazing. I mean, I'll let him talk for himself, but like he had to get into bed as quickly as possible. His one-man tent was up in 30 seconds. Never seen it. It was like a pop-up tent. He was in it. I have to kind of wind down. So me winding down was checking the boards are secure, and it probably did skip heading because I would check the boards are secure. Yeah, they're secure. I'll walk away. I need to go and check again. What if they float off? So I was like putting logs next to them, and I was tying a guy rope around stuff. And
we did have our duties, to be fair. Just sorry to interrupt, Craig. I just need to be clear here. I did my jobs before I got into bed. He had more jobs to do that he felt he needed to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, it wasn't a case of that, but it's like we had these split jobs, and then you get into bed, and I've talked about this before about trying to set the alarms. This is where, for me, unlike Martin, any kind of mathematical equation, the longer the trip went on, the harder it became to do some of the most simplistic maths. And for me, it was around setting the alarm clock. We as you say, we have a 6-hour break. We have a sort of 6-hour mandatory stop time. I had a stopwatch that started a 6-hour countdown the second we knew we were going to stay at that campsite. That was the easy part. Duties, we get stuff ready, and then it comes to sitting there going, right, I now need to set an alarm clock that's going to go off an hour and 15 is what we decided.
Clearly, I didn't have to worry about this stuff because Craig does.
Yeah. So I was like, I need an alarm clock to go off an hour and 15 before the 6-hour timer goes off. But by now, half an hour's passed of me faffing around putting stuff up. So what time does it need to be set for? I had to start drawing pictures of clock faces. I've got a notepad where I'm drawing clock faces because I just couldn't compute something so simple. But our processes did get refined. We did all our cooking. We never cooked and ate in camp. We never ate in camp. While we were breaking camp, water was boiling. Our freeze-dried food was made.
Maybe we shouldn't be giving too many secrets away, Craig. Hey?
Oh, we're done now, mate. All our food was cooked and put into heat-proof containers while we were breaking camp, and we would eat on the water because, as the guides will tell you, you can be eating while drifting at 10 kilometers an hour. I'm probably going off a tangent now. Skip, have you got anything else to add on our camp routine?
Oh, camp routine? No, you're pretty much on the money, mate. Yeah, I used to go to bed and you'd faff around for a while and then go to bed.
Looking to take your performance to the next level? Then look no further than Ocean Pacific. Introducing the Strike Series VRX, the ultimate SUP paddle designed for maximum power and efficiency. Its firm flex shaft optimizes energy transfer for efficient paddling. Its double dihedral blade ensures an unrivaled grip on the water, boosting your surfing, racing and touring performance. Ocean Pacific sponsors and promotes UK surf and race culture, supporting athletes and adventure racing teams, including the Shac team competing in this year's Yukon 1000, and they're committed to providing professional grade equipment at an accessible price. Visit oceanspacific.com today to explore their range of high performance paddles, hardware and apparel, and the links to all of our sponsors are in the show notes. We'd like to thank Baltic Life Jackets for returning as episode sponsors this season. Baltic designed and developed their SUP Elite PFDs to solve two key problems facing stand-up paddlers. The slimmed-down front panel makes it easier to climb back on your board, and the ergonomic cutaways around the arms accommodate the SUP stroke, allowing you to paddle freely without restriction to the point that you hardly notice you're even wearing it. The SUP Elite also incorporates storage and the option to add a hydration pack, which is perfect for the summer. So check out the SUP Elite and the SUP Pro PFDs at your local stockist or at supfmpodcast.com/Baltic. Renegade Moose Chasers, what about your routines? Did they develop over time, or did they sort of loosen up as you got more increasingly exhausted?
Yeah, I mean, we had the same problem with the alarms a couple of times, didn't we?
Well, you did.
Well, you did as well. We both set the alarms and they didn't go off.
Yeah.
But luckily, we did wake up in time, so... Yeah.
I think that we got tighter as we went on. I think we got a bit more not disciplined, but just got used to the process as we went on because...
I would agree with that.
Do that too. And you simplify it as well, don't you? You definitely simplify things the further it went on. It was like, well, we don't need to do that. And sorry to interrupt, but I agree with Martin, what Martin's saying.
We kind of looked after our own stuff when we got off because we both had our own stuff, so I did mine, he did his, that was fine. We did the same as what you guys did. When we were making our evening meal, we did eat our evening meal in camp, but we also made our next day's lunch or midday or, daytime meal at the same time. and we did breakfast on the go. So we did breakfast on the go, we drift for that, and then we already had our meal for lunch the next day, done the night before, and we would drift on that as well. We just weren't that fussed if it was hot or not, because
3 meals a day. You had 3 meals a day and a cabin.
Oh yeah, yeah. Welcome to
Hey, what are we doing wrong here?
Yeah, massage. You know, we got a black bear to put its paws on our back. So no, in answer to that, I think our timings remained the same. They, you know, and we were pretty much okay. We were always overtime a little bit for sure, but 10 to 15 minutes overtime. You know, whatever.
Exactly.
We're on holiday.
Exactly. Team Shac, you stayed ahead of the pack until well into day 5, which is quite incredible at the pace that some of these people were coming through. And got to say something now for the Sauna kayak team. Those women were absolutely incredible. I mean, I guess you could have seen it in all of their social media ahead of time. They were just like an absolute machine, you know, in all of their
they were like a Soviet bloc Dolph Lundgren thing going on there.
Yeah, they were absolutely sort of steaming through. It was Linda and Annette, and they also came down to welcome everyone by the riverside as well, didn't they, all the way through? I think they were there at the finish for the Moose Chasers as well, weren't they? So, I mean, there were 3 Estonian teams there. Is that usual? Did you get to speak to them? Is it a special year for Estonia and the Yukon 1000? I mean, I guess the landscape potentially would be broadly similar. It's kind of in that area, I guess.
It's obviously this year the 3 teams. Kayaking is a very big sport in Estonia, as I think we all now discovered, and seeing the exposure.
It's like a national sport, I think.
Yes, a national sport, and following them and their preparations, and obviously again doing the documentary, I get to see a lot of the prep content as well, so you can see how important it was to them and to the country. But the teams are also very different. I mean, obviously the 2 girls were out to set records. And if you think, going back to what we said earlier, Simon, that you can't compare years, these guys are going out to set a record for kayaks full stop. Not a record, not to win this year's race. So they already know they're going up against the record from last year of Ben Racing doing it on a high water year. So I think to go into a race knowing that you're already at a massive disadvantage and still go in smiling like those girls did, and to almost do it is incredible. And in contrast, one of the other Estonian teams, they were really fast, but they also loved their coffee. And so basically what would happen is they would paddle really fast, overtake a couple of teams, and then stop and make coffee and get passed by the teams again. And we were hearing these stories about you need to catch the Estonian. I can't remember the team name. They were
so we could have a coffee.
And it's like if you caught them, they would make you a coffee. So I think the Estonian, they showed the spirit not just on the water but on the land. Their support teams, and obviously it's an unsupported race, but the fact that you have teams of you at the beginning. I mean, it looked like the Olympic Games if you were walking around Whitehorse at the beginning because everyone's in a matching Estonian tracksuits. But they were amazing, and it's like they were so kind and welcoming and friendly and supportive to every single team and every person that race, from the racers to their support team. They waited and welcomed in every team, and for us to pull in and see the girls waiting there to welcome us in when they'd passed us 5 days earlier. It's not the best place to hang out for 5 days at the finish line, particularly. It's incredible. And I think that's a testament to them.
Were they there 5 days before us, Craig?
No, they passed us 5, but they were there 2 or 3 days.
Okay.
They've spent a lot of time there, and I think there's friendships and relationships been built with all the racers there, and I think Martin, we would all like to go over there, right, and take part in some of their races.
I tell you what, they've got some cracking races over there, haven't they? So yeah. I've got a feeling there may be a question coming up later about that kind of stuff, but there's they've got some pretty beasts of races over there. I mean, I think they mentioned a race that they did, and I think they won it, called the Gila XL or something. It's like some kind of ridiculously long, hard race with no brakes, and they won it. But yeah, I'd love to go over there actually. And now we have friends over there. We could probably wangle it. Yeah.
And if not, you could probably find a hut there, Martin.
Yeah.
So 5 days in, Craig and Skip, you got passed by the Humsana team. At what point, because we did talk about fatigue and that kicking in, and I know that was a big limiter. And so when did the sort of fatigue really kick in for you?
I'll have a go at this one, Craigie. Well, actually, I think Craig and I both felt that the longer the race went on, actually, the stronger we became. The more in tune with what we were doing, became almost easier from that sense, because your body just kind of dials in, it learns what it's doing. It's the mental bit that then becomes a bit more of a challenge. But physically, you get stronger as the race goes on. Well, that's what I think Craig and I both experienced. Again, not talking for Kim and Martin. So that was a really interesting one. So, when we were getting to the second half of the race, we were feeling stronger, I think it's fair to say. Craig, would you say the same?
Yeah, I would. It's quite interesting, actually, because I don't think, well, the sheer nature of the race, none of the people on this podcast had ever done something like that. So you don't know what's going to happen. And you think, the things you think you're going to struggle with, which would be physical fatigue, actually, as Skip said, you kind of get into a routine. It gets dialed in, and you just get into this automatic kind of cycle of paddling. And the stuff that really hits you is the mental side. What we had is because we knew we were out. We didn't get overtaken until sort of like later on day 5. So there's a strange thing there of like thinking, well, we know we've not taken the wrong turn, but where is everyone? But then we had creeping paranoia. So the first team caught us, and then we were like, Martin and Kim, they could be just literally around the corner behind us, and we were like, you're thinking, and you start having mind games with yourself.
Right to the end, we had that, didn't we?
Right to the very end. Literally at the very last corner, we still were looking back, and it's because but I think it's a really interesting thing about how your mind works, because when it's not got much to think about, it just creates things. So hallucinations, audio hallucinations, something I've never experienced before, like hearing songs and things in the mountains. Now the mountains echo, you do hear things, but so I think
can I just interrupt? Sorry, Craig, to interrupt you. I just got to say that there was a moment when I did quite a lot of singing on the river, so there was a lot of echoing going on when we were singing, and Craig would go, Skip, you've got to keep it down because Martin and Kim might hear you. They'll know how far away we are. All these mind games. It was bizarre.
And you talk yourself into these mind games, and it's like and it's because you're, physically, we found a routine. Yes, you've got blisters, things ache, you need to stretch, but you're looking after those things, and you're treating any blisters or scratches or cuts or things. But the mind has all this time to kind of like just, it can't think of anything complicated. So it almost goes to the most simplistic thing it thinks about. So it's looking at a map, it's looking at a timer, and then it's filling the rest of the time with paranoia.
Well, more so for you, I think, than me.
Yeah, no, more so for me, because I'm a very competitive person. But like, I would look back and you'll see a floating tree. Is that them? We've been too slack, Skip. We've floated too long resting. And in hindsight, I know now that really, it's mind games. But it's a thing you can't train for. Like sleep deprivation. It's nothing you can train for, as we said before. So yeah, it's an interesting one. But I think physical fatigue, I think it hits you, guys. You tell me as well. But it hits you maybe an hour after you finish.
And then for the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, when you stop and you stand, you stand still, and you're away off your board, and you've got changed, and you've maybe had a shower, and then it's almost like it's like, well, here you go. I've not given you any grief for the last 9 days. Bang.
So Moose Chasers, I mean, what was your experience in terms of fatigue, Martin? I know that you had some interesting times on your board, falling asleep almost.
Yeah. So I echo pretty much what Craig's just said. Actually, that physically,
first couple of
days, you would go to bed. Obviously, you're lying on a hard surface on a camp or whatever, and you can't get comfortable because your body just aches. And then kind of after that, your body just goes, this is all good, no problem at all. And I tell you what, I had
at all.
None at all. I had no aches whatsoever after day 3. None at all. In fact, I was more than happy. Like when I got to the finish line, I actually, after we did our little interview, I ran up to the truck stop because I had so much energy and I felt okay. And I said to John, I said, I suppose we've got to do a 10K run now, have we? You know, because I felt totally bob on.
It was a free burger they ran for.
Don't blame him.
Fueled by the beer.
Yeah.
Beer.
But the hardest thing, as again, I echo what Craig's just said, is sleep deprivation. You cannot self-administer sleep deprivation. It has to come and bite you on the arse. It's as simple as that. And I don't think I experienced it till at least day 3, maybe 4. But I actually fell asleep standing up. And that was pretty freaky, you know, because, you know, when you paddle, Simon, you put the paddle in, you hinge a little bit, you know, you lean forward. So I was going, paddle down, stand up, paddle down, stand up. And my eyes were just going closing. And I literally fell asleep standing up. And not that anybody should fall asleep at the wheel in a car, and nobody does it. And it's never happened to anyone, obviously. But that sensation is exactly it. You know, you wobble so far and then you wake yourself up at a quick brace stroke and, whoa, okay. Sitting down, we were sitting down on the boards for, you know, resting, paddling. You've got the camping bag behind you. And actually, that's really comfy. So you fall asleep. Mm-hmm. And I think my mind towards the end of it started to learn how to deal with the sleep deprivation, but it didn't come till much later. So my way of working it was like, you know, I would literally get my hat, put it in the water, throw loads of a sodden hat on my head. And then I would literally get handfuls of water and throw it into my face. And then I'd slap myself around the face once or twice because it hurt. And that's how you dealt with it, because sleep deprivation kind of only kind of lasted for about an hour, around 10 in the morning. And then you'd go through
sleep.
Yeah, I heard about your power naps, Skip.
Yeah, they were brilliant. Absolutely. I didn't know I could power nap, and it all came from Glenn saying to me that he learnt to do it in the canoe last year, and the man grew up in a canoe.
Yeah.
Never done it before, and he said to me, and I was struggling was it day 2, Craig? I had my first, I've got to try this.
Yeah, day 2 or 3. It was fairly early on.
Yeah. It was fairly early on. I was like, I'm nodding off already. I'm going to try what Glenn said. And I laid down and we'd float for a bit, and I'd have 5 minutes or 5 or 6 minutes, whatever Craig allowed me to have. And for me, that sorted me right out. I mean, Craig is a Duracell bunny. He like in camp, he didn't need the same sleep I needed. He was the same on the river. He's a machine. I wasn't the same. I had to learn how to very quickly, and I did really early on, fortunately. And I would do it twice a day. I did it twice a day, and it was both in the morning. Both 5 minute or 5 or 10 minute kips were in the morning on the board while we were traveling. And for me, that was my lifesaver. And I'm so glad that I learned that, or Glenn had mentioned it to me so early on in that race, because it was an absolute, for both of us, actually, I think, Craig, wasn't it? It was what got me up and paddling.
That's incredible. That's a real education, and so interesting about how you tolerate that sort of uncomfortableness there, particularly in terms of sleeping, and how your body, you essentially get fit on the road, and the body's amazingly adaptable in terms of how it develops and adapt, particularly when it's under stress. I've got to ask about wildlife encounters. We talked about a lot about moose tracks and bear scat. Did you see any moose chasers or any bears out there?
Yeah, we did. We saw a young one, didn't we, on the bank the first time?
Yeah, day two. We saw a moose on the bank.
One evening when we were just getting off the boats to camp, a moose had swum across the river with its 2 youngsters. So that was quite special.
And that was in a freaky place as well.
Yeah, near the church.
Yeah, so just imagine this: you are 426 miles in. You're about 200 miles from any form of civilization or whatever it is, and then you see St Andrew's Anglican Church, and we're camping on the end of the spit of land there. And
did we do the same race?
Yeah, I'm really, really confused. You camped by a church, you stayed in a hut, you had massages. What what's going on here?
Well, it's either that's all the hallucinations, isn't it? But
do you know what? It could have been, couldn't it? But talk. So yeah. I'm just gone off at a tangent there. But this was the freakiest place on earth. It's like middle of nowhere. No, there's no roads to it on the map, and you see this like wooden church that's all a little bit crooked, with a bell tower in it, and a house there, and then maybe a few outbuildings. And then you look on because the mapping we had it on there, and it said St Andrew's Anglican Church, and you went,
Craig, how did you miss this?
Wow.
Yeah,
wow.
That was the place where we got off, and there was a spit of land right at the end, and we looked literally. We just drawn into camp, and then we looked upriver, and there was a mother moose with 2 young in tow just swimming across the river, and they got out on our island. And I remember Kim saying, "Make sure you go the other way, missus. No, don't come this way." Yeah, and I think we saw loads of beavers. Beavers are really fun. You'll probably find on the videos that I've sent as well, Craig. I'm actually laughing at myself going, beavers are so much fun, aren't they? They make like big explosions.
What's great about the beavers is they swim out, they kind of swim across the water, and you're traveling with the flow. So we're perception wise, we're like, I'm going to intercept this beaver. He's swimming across, and they almost give you a little sideways look and carry on. And then they had this moment of realization when they realized that you're currently on an intercept course, and then they're like, do I carry on swimming across or do I turn around? And they generally turn around again and go the other way, and they slap their tails. And the beavers are great, weren't they? I mean, it's like they're great fun. You know, bald eagles towards the end were just like seagulls. They're so common. I got attacked.
Yes, this is brilliant. It was so funny.
Well, we shared the same story, Craig and I. It happened to both of us. Yeah,
we got attacked by what? Does anyone know what the birds are called? Arctic terns. So they look a little bit like small seagulls, and they're very aggressive at protecting their
territorial and protective over their nests and areas. Yeah.
And I was in front, so they kind of picked on me. And by the sounds of it, Martin had exactly the same experience as well. We talked about this on a call a couple of weeks ago, and they would dive bomb you and squawk, and they would fly maybe a foot or 2 above your head.
Yeah, it was so funny. It was so funny to watch.
And, I nearly clouded.
A definite highlight.
Yeah, I was like trying to swing my paddle, not to hit them, but to kind of.
Yes, you did.
He was hungry, Martin. He was hungry.
Yeah. But I tell you what, I mean, we saw. I mean, the moose, as you guys saw. We saw a couple of bears on the bank and nothing in camp. One of the things that I will always remember seeing, and having researched it afterwards and seeing how rare it is, Skip and I saw lynx, which was we were paddling along, and it was you probably like most teams, you start off having a game of wildlife bingo. You think it's going to last the whole duration of the race, where you're going to keep points for different animals. 3 kilometers in, you're bored of the game, and no one can remember what the score is. So, but it's like there are certain things you think would be like that golden ticket or the big number. And I remember saying to Skip, I was like, look, there's a cat. And Skip's like, I don't think that's a cat, Craig. I think that might be a lynx. And then you suddenly realise, because your distance perception is so off, that actually what looks like a cat is actually still 400 metres across on the bank, prowling on the bank. And and I looked it up afterwards, and it's actually, there are Yukon lynxes, and they are obviously very shy. And so that was I think a real special moment for me spotting it. And I think for Skip and I seeing something that, was, such a special thing to see.
Yeah. For me, it was the osprey. I spent a lot of time in Scotland, and, osprey hang out in Scotland a fair amount, and I've never seen any. And we saw that our first osprey just before we went into Five Fingers. And I was like, well, that's not an eagle. My God, it's an osprey. I like my wildlife. You might have figured this one out. So to see things that I've wanted to see for a long time, both here, because we get them here, and then over there, things like lynx and moose and bears, they're all fascinating to me. But the osprey was just like, wow. there's a message. What Glenn would have said to me is that the creator is sending you a message now that actually Five Fingers is going to be fine. And it was, Five Fingers was absolutely fine. So yeah, it's like learning from the people that live in these territories, that the messages they get from these different things, whether it be wildlife, whether it be plants, tobacco, used a lot by First Nation people to bless safety and travels, really comes into the forefront of your mind, and you're like, okay, there are messages being sent to me. Well, that's how I felt anyway, and it was very unique and special trip to have, because the wildlife that we saw were not interested in us because we were just on the river floating past. So they just hung out, and we hung out, and I'd look at them and they'd look at you, and you'd float past and their head would watch you go past and you'd be watching them, and they didn't go anywhere. And it was like, this is just insane, but wonderful.
So talking about wildlife, and this is something that didn't happen it certainly didn't happen to us, and I don't think it happened to you guys, but Simon, we are part of a Yukon Adler 2023 Facebook messenger group. And
I'm not. Hold on a minute. I'm not part of this.
Aren't you?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Bit late now.
You said earlier, you don't do social.
Okay. But it was yesterday. Somebody posted some footage just past Dalton Highway Bridge, so literally maybe about 30 miles south. And there was a beluga whale just south of the bridge where we finished. So, I mean, they actually posted the video footage. So, my God, who'd have thought a beluga whale in a river? I mean, that's wildlife on another level, isn't it? That was awesome to see. But, and knowing it was just at Ramparts, so just past where we finished. But yeah.
Dodgy sat nav by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
Dodgy GPS and mapping for the belugas, well.
A couple of miles before the bridge, before we finished, we saw the black bear with two cubs.
Yeah, a pair of twins.
Bowling each other over in the grass.
Yeah.
That was quite
nice. Lovely.
And that was lovely to see, because we were about 3 miles from the finish, actually. And that was the second bear we'd seen in 1,000.
It's a message from the creator.
Yeah.
You're going to make it. And this is my moment to allow you to see that. Yeah, that's what goes on here.
Yeah. Sorry, there's one thing I'm going to say here, which I think is really poignant. It's nothing to do with wildlife, but it is about other sort of... in 1,000 miles, we saw one piece of litter. One. So did you guys see any litter?
The worst bit I saw was coming into Stevens Village, and there was a house at the side of the river just as you approached Stevens Village, where the bank was falling away and there was shit everywhere. Sorry, French again. There was rubbish everywhere. But apart from that, I was really disappointed to see that. In fact, Craig and I were like, I think we were taking a picture, and it was like, oh, hang on a minute, I'm not sure I want to take this picture because that's really, really wrong.
Yeah.
But apart from that, it was incredibly pristine in terms of pollution from the outside world.
Just tell us about the flats. How did you manage that, and how did your maps work out with that?
I think everyone John always said that his concern is always around. The reason the kayaks and canoes leave a day later than everyone else is so that, because they are faster, the idea is that all the teams will kind of roughly be in the flats at the same time. So and having now done the race, we think we can all understand exactly why that's a very good idea, because at that part of the river, you may think that this is the final leg. This is the last. It's actually the most dangerous and confusing. You're most tiredest. Common sense beats any map, and common sense at that point is it's lowest.
Isn't there?
The river changes so much every winter because of the ice melt that it looks like a war zone. It looks like napalm's gone through. There's no banks.
There's no reference points, Craigie, is there? There's no mountains. There's no hills.
Nothing.
There's nothing.
And the flow. You need to go 20k that way, but the flow goes round this way, and then you go where you think you should go, and you suddenly hit a sandbar which is just under the water, and because the water is so cloudy, you didn't see it, and it's hard to explain to anyone about being there, but you're in it for nearly days. It's just huge, and you've spent 800 miles using maps and GPS to pretty much good use. and you get to this point, and it's like the final. The way I saw it, it was the final challenge. It's like the big boss level.
Its own, wasn't it?
And it's yeah, and I think I can see now why the organisers do their best to have everyone, because the only ones going to help you in that is other racers. We were lucky in as much as the canoes and kayaks caught us, didn't they, when we were as we entered the flats, and we very quickly learned by watching them overtake us and try and follow them. And Skip, you've got some stories. Tell them about Kelly. We followed in. It was Kelly and Steve, I think.
Talking about reading the river.
Yeah, well, you tell them the story there, because we were probably about 2 hours in, and we were like, we're 2 hours into 2 days in this environment.
Yeah, I'm hoping I'm going to get this right, because Craig might be talking about something. But I think what we realised was, watching these guys that had spent time on rivers of that kind of calibre, understood how to look for the markers that made you catch the right bits of flow, because it's so vast. I'm on the right track, Craig, am I? Yeah. Okay. It's so vast that the flow is far from everywhere. And there's two ways of really working out where it is. And one is and you're in it because the Speedo's telling you so. But there's another way, which is knowledge of rivers and seeing and we have the advantage on a paddleboard, actually, because we're up high, to see where that meander goes within a great expanse of water. And we were, Craig's right, we were fortunate to be able to watch people that had experienced those kinds of environments and that kind of water and go, hang on, there's something else here that can help us through this bit. And we did a lot of that throughout the whole journey of learning on the job completely. But we did it effectively, and I think that really, was great for us. It helped us kind of gain confidence. I think we had a conversation quite early on in the race, actually, that said about every section of this race is teaching you something new that you didn't know before. And the reason that they set the race up the way that they do it is so that you are gaining those skills, that when you get to the really, really complicated, difficult bits, you've got more skills than you had when you started. And that's a real important progression in the story of a race like this. I think I hope I'm covering what you're saying, Craigie.
You are absolutely. It's like you kind of level up as you. Maybe the computer game analogy is quite good. It starts off in hindsight. Like I joke that like the first part of the race was like a busman's holiday. The guys are in it's sunny, the water's crystal clear. It's tough. Don't get us wrong, but like you're learning skills. Learning skills that, and in hindsight now, it does get tougher and tougher. You feel you're learning new skills that you then get to kind of put into practice. And as Skip said, from a paddleboard, when you're high up, you think you should be going there and forward, and then you can see a darker shadow in the water, and it doesn't go straight as well. It kind of, in the flats, and Martin Kim, you must have seen this. You can almost see a darker patch, a bit like a if you see
the Skyway to Heaven or something, didn't I?
It's a bit like a riptide on a beach. It's a darker patch of water, but it doesn't go in a line. It kind of bends, and you watch canoe. I mean, canoes are incredible because you watch them go, and they can hold their position, and they find it. Then someone's steering and someone's paddling, and we would try and copy their line, which is really difficult on a paddleboard when you're paddling on your own as well, because the way of steering and power is very different. But yeah, the flats, it was like the final big boss level, and obviously it made it worth it at the end, but it
was brutal.
It was nothing enjoyable, really. It's the kind of place you like to fly across the top of.
Yeah,
and not
even that would be boring.
Yeah, you're not selling it as a holiday destination, chaps. I've got to say. I mean, obviously there are all sorts of twists and turns. You've got to pick your route. Did you make any expensive false turns there, or did you manage to sort of pretty much stay on track?
Skip, can I answer this first part of this one?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, I thought you probably
know
would.
Where we're going, yeah. But I think you know where I'm going with this one. So probably I'll set it up, then you can destroy it. It's probably the best way. So I'm going back to what we said about the whole creeping paranoia. At this point, I was deep in my Kim and Martin are literally one bend behind us. We've held this out, and here we go. We're going to lose it on the 11th hour. We're going to, and on my maps, in the flats, there's a few known shortcuts. They're cut throughs. There's a lot of like oxbow bends where there's bits you can go across. And actually, there's one oxbow bend that now is no longer an oxbow. It actually has the river's broken through, and you can cut off a big thing. So there's a few points where there's some cut throughs that last year, particularly in a high water year, were great. And they used them, and we saw them on the tracker last year. And I spoke to a few locals this year, and they're like, yeah, it could be good. But you're always worried about, you might get halfway down, there's a beaver dam, or there's a blockage, or it's not quite shallow. But so early on the race, when the Estonian girls passed us, and they told us, that Kim and Martin weren't behind us. They'd saw them a couple of days earlier. So we're like, okay, we know we've got a gap. Now let's manage it. So what we agreed with each other was we're therefore not going to take any risky decisions like cut-throughs or things where we might get stuck. I had lost a shoe in a capsize. I had no shoes or things on my feet. So if I had to drag a board across a beaver dam, it could lose.
I think I kept saying to you, Craig, we're better at paddling than dragging at this stage.
Yeah. Skip was like, we're better at paddling and dragging. Let's not put any risk. So we basically agreed, no shortcuts. Even though it's longer, follow the river. And Skip, I should let you carry on.
Can I cut in and just give some perspective on there's no shortcuts even though it's longer. So I'm sure Martin and Kim will reflect on this, but I remember going around one of those bends you're talking about, Craig, that have turned some of them into oxbows and so on. And at this moment in time, I was doing some mathematics. I don't know why. I decided that I wanted to calculate what the rough distance of the inside of the bend was. And the short calculation I did was 10 miles. It was one bend in many. And, and then it was 400 meters or 500 meters across the river. So the outside of the bend was like 17 miles. I just wanted to add that before you carried on, Craig. There we go.
No, but now, so the agreement we made was don't take the shortcuts, play it safe, follow the river, don't risk hitting a beaver dam or getting grounded out. We're definitely faster paddling than dragging. And Skip, you can tell them what happened to me in my creeping paranoia of Martin and Kim catching us.
Craig struggled sometimes with the afterthought of those decisions that were made completely together, because he's competitive. So he decided that he needed, for his own peace of mind, to check that, after the event, whether we might have been able to come through that cut through or not. That frustrated me a little bit because we're now in agreement, fortunately. That once you make a decision and you stick to it. But Craig liked to go back and have a little look just to see what if, because he was worried that Kim and Martin were on our asses. And they might pop out in front of us. That was the thing. You were so worried they might pop out in front of us that you needed to check they weren't coming down the cut through.
Purposefully paddled to the entrance of the cut through, hoping I would see a blockage, so I could reassure myself that we'd made the right call. And then you'd see it flowing. And then I would be like, mate, it could be okay. And he was like, we've made the decision. We'd go round. We'd do the, in some cases,
no shoes.
14-mile loop round. And we'd reach the exit point of the cut through. And I had to paddle over to it. Even if it meant paddling a kilometre across the river, I would do that because I wanted to check, hoping to see that it's blocked. And if it wasn't blocked, hoping to see that Martin and Kim weren't coming down it.
Yeah. And I'll add to that just one thing, that there's a rule, and I'm sure Martin and Kim will agree with this. There's a rule in the race, and I've spoken to John about it, where you, as paddleboards, have to stay 30 metres away from each other at all times. It's not fucking possible. It's just not possible, particularly when your paddle partner wants to go and check something that you've already decided you're not going to do. I weren't going to do that.
There is something here, though, that we need a bit more detail on, which is your missing shoes, Craig. So you capsized, you lost a shoe or shoes, and you were shoeless for the rest of the trip.
Yeah, so I think our board admin, I think both teams, having spoke to everyone and seen everything, our board admin was really good. Everything was strapped down. We'd done practices at the lake, at the shack. We'd done capsize practices. We'd turned the boards over purposefully. The way we had our boards kitted out, they floated really well, and we practiced turning them back round. And so we'd done all that stuff, and 99% of our board admin throughout the whole race was great. You're always everything had a tagline on it. So every water bottle, your pee bottle, your coffee, everything had a tagline on it. It was always attached to something. Pee bottle, yeah. Oh, on the board. Anyway, that's enough.
I've still got mine. I love it.
Everything had, everything was secured in some way or another, and you could get to it. We had like a elastic paracord, so you could pull things towards you. And there's quite a few times when important kit would pop off and fall. Our life straw hydration flasks, it would fall in the water, and it's on a tagline, so you just pull it back in. So my shoes, I had these really nice. I'm not going to use the brand name, but they're very nice swim run trainers. So they're great on land. So they're great when you're making camp and you're having to get all your gear onto rough land, but also on the water they drain and dry really quickly. The problem was, as Martin and Kim will probably tell you as well, is your feet swell quite a lot as the race goes on. So you have to kind of manage things, and you can't always be wearing shoes that would fit you.
To be fair, Craig, I didn't wear a pair of shoes in the whole event.
But also you've got you're mindful of trench foot, which is very common. Feet. If you're wearing like sealskin socks, which I had, they're great when they're dry, but if they get water in them, they don't let water out. Sorry, but they also don't let water out, so you can risk trench foot. And as Martin said, because of the heat and the sun, sunburn's a real big thing as well. So you've got all these things going on and also when it's really hot, you put your feet in the water to cool down. So you want to have that kind of thing. So you're always taking shoes, socks on, off, putting sun cream on. And I had these really nice shoes that were my camp shoes, my swimming, my paddling shoes. And I thought I had them carabined on just past Carmax. I capsized upside down. No, it was not past Carmax. It was actually before the girls caught us.
Yeah, it was the other side of the circle.
Yeah. No, it was before the Alaskan border. Capsized. It was a horrible day. It was pouring with rain. I managed to get the board back over again, got back on the board, and then your first thing you do is you're looking for anything floating in the water. All is good. And then all I could see was one shoe. And then there's a very nice, expensive swim run shoe of a brand I will not mention because they would not replace the one.
No, you're joking.
Anyway, the shoe is somewhere. And as Martin and Kim said, did you see any rubbish? Well, if you drain the Yukon one day, then you're going to find a GoPro from the French guys last year, about 18 pairs of sunglasses.
And a GPS.
Skip, 18 pairs of sunglasses from Skip, and a right foot Vivo.
Well, there you go. So for those of you listeners who are taking part in 2024, we've got a bit of a scavenger hunt for you, and special bonus if they find Craig's shoes. So we're through the flats, thankfully, and we're approaching the finishing line. And I think Martin mentioned that getting to the highway bridge was a bit like being on a treadmill, and I guess you would have had that experience quite a bit. You've got a vast river stretching out ahead of you. And
great analogy.
You can see it; it's in front of you, but it just remains out of reach. How was Team Shac? How were you at the end there, and how were you physically at the finish?
Craig, is it all right if I start and let you? Because there's something I want to say about Craig in this moment about that final stretch when you re-enter what is more like a river. Having seen the mountains as you're coming out the flats starting to appear and going, we know we finish in the mountains, but those mountains are a long way away. It can't be those mountains. And you're traveling. And then the hills start growing and you enter the mouth of what is more like a river again. And I had the Flow Hunter with me. Craig became known as the Flow Hunter by this point in many circumstances, and we found flow in that bit of the river, Craig. I think we were travelling all right.
Yeah, it was weird though, but it was like unlike the rest of the river. It was kind of like it was doing this. So like if you
can't do that, you can't do that on a podcast, mate. That don't work.
You're out of it. And it'd be 1 minute when I was in it, and Skip would be 10 meters to my right, and he would be out of it. Then all of a sudden nothing changed in our cadence or our paddle strokes, but he would then just start moving ahead of me. So and you're at the end of the race, and as Martin said, you realise you're looking at this map and you're like, well, it's only a little right hand. You're not in the flow for long before you have to move. But it's more, I think the treadmill was the most amazing analogy, actually. I'd
agree with that. It was like the final test of the race, wasn't it? Do you remember us referring to it as the final test?
It was like you kind of at that point, I was still looking backwards. By the way, at this point, we still every so often look backwards. Like Martin and Kim, there, are they going to be behind us? And you're kind of waiting for this bridge, and there's a point where you come around a corner and you see something that just is not it's a line rather than a weird shape. And again, we had the benefit of having been there last year.
Yeah.
At the finish line. So we knew what we were looking for. So when we saw that line straight away, we were like, well, there it is. But even then, you're still 4 or 5K out. And I think
we celebrated 3 or 4 times on that stretch of river.
Yeah, then we realised,
and then we were still going.
Yeah, it's like just like we were with the Lake Labarge. We celebrated too early. We were, So it's just incredible. You're getting towards that bridge, and it starts to evolve. It kind of evolve into what we knew it looked like having been there. And unlike Martin and Kim, we knew what to expect when we got to the beach. So you start looking out for that.
Like nothing.
Yeah,
there's nothing.
It's just a surreal thing, and it's incredible. And there's a few more cabins that start to appear. People will live up that way, but you're still off the face of the earth. And I think that there's probably maybe 1 or 2K before the bridge was the one time I thought, okay, I've done it. To be honest, even 10K, 10K, 20K earlier, which over 1,600 kilometers, there's still things that could go. You're still not thinking like that, but I think once you've visually seen a line of concrete, and it's like, strike me down, I can still float that finish line. I've done it.
Amazing.
I think,
And we questioned quite a lot at that stage. How almost how we were going to feel when we did go under the bridge and turn right. Something we'd visualised, Craig and I anyway, for 4 years, and Martin and Kim for a shorter period of time. But we'd always visualised getting to that bridge and turning right. And you then start thinking about, right, how am I going to feel when I get there? Or we did, and we discussed it actually in the run into it. And actually, I don't think how we actually felt at the end was anything to do with any of the discussions we had.
Yeah, I mean, I've always talked about this, and John's mentioned it's an odyssey, and it certainly seems to have been that for both teams. You learn out there on the road, you learn things about your own way that you can deal with mentally stressful environments, physical environments, sleep deprivation, all of that sort of stuff. And at the end of the day, you achieve your objective at the end together. And it looks like you're still talking to each other within the teams. So, although Craig, you are sitting quite a distance away from Skip, but to be fair, you were in the last session as well. So I won't draw any conclusions from that. Just in terms of the physical after effects, and we need to get onto the questions fairly quickly because we've only got 25 minutes left. In terms of weight loss, the Yukon 1000 has also been described as the most extreme weight loss plan in history. I think the record is about 7 kilos. You guys are still looking incredibly slimline. Particularly Kim and Martin.
I blacked out my camera for a reason.
Have you? There you go. But did you measure the physical effects of the trip on you, Craig? You're looking particularly pleased. There,
not pleased. More as someone from previous conversations, and like Martin, as a background of personal training and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That kind of thing is something we gauge stuff on. It is a metric that is interesting, even just because you can, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, those kind of metrics are something that are interesting. So it was really, I lost about 6.5 kilograms.
Wow.
I'd put on weight purposefully beforehand, and I hoped that it would all be fat that'd fall off, but knew it wouldn't be. Muscle mass went down, but it was interesting that I lost probably 6.5. It's hard because I didn't have a set of scales at the finish line. So there was there's a few days before I got to somewhere where I could jump on a set of scales, but lost this is for the geeky people. I lost I think about 4 centimeters off my waist.
Wow.
I know 4 centimeters off your waist.
Yeah, you've never measured your waist, so you have no idea what that means. But,
no, I haven't got a clue.
Yeah. So Martin. It is really interesting because it's when you put your body through something like that, it's fascinating to see how it obviously adapts. We've seen that. That going to try and say this in a way that there's people in that race. If you look at the age range and what you visually look at people physically, and you have these preconceptions, or maybe people have these preconceptions of like, how could you do something like that? You know, you're older, or this is a race for 25-year-olds that are built like brick.
Not at all. It's the opposite,
or whatever. But actually, that's the muscle that's important.
Yeah,
and it's amazing how your body will adapt. And yes, you get back from a race like this, and it's interesting to see how much weight you've lost or how much muscle you've lost, and it's quite fun. But like,
it's not.
There's one muscle. There's one muscle that gets a lot stronger after a race like this, and I'm tapping my head for those that are not watching.
Right, guys. So we've got some questions here, some listeners' questions, and this is probably going to be more of a sort of lightning round than I was hoping for. But we've had a really interesting
quick
chat
fire,
here.
Quick fire.
Now,
yeah, we like quick
okay,
fire.
so I'm starting with 2 questions. So these guys, I don't know whether we've heard of these guys before, but it's Nick and Dan from something called Fortune Favours the Brave. So,
hey boys, how are you?
So to the first question. And remember, this is a lightning round. So for Team Shac, how many hours did you actually stand up on your board for? I think there's some assumption that you sat down a bit, but
No idea. But there were periods of times where you had to sit down because the wind was so bad that you couldn't have stood up anyway. So I couldn't answer that. Craig, you?
No, likewise. I think the best thing about being on a paddleboard is you have options.
Yeah.
Like guys in canoes and kayaks, people say, how can you paddleboard it? I'm like, how can you sit down for that long?
Yeah.
We can sit down, lay down, and stretch out.
Yeah.
Okay.
All good.
Lovely. Okay, so there's unanimity on that one. I suspect there might be unanimity for this question, which is the second one from Fortune Favours the Brave, is if you were going to do the race again, would you do it in a canoe?
Yes.
Yeah.
Ask the question if we do it on a paddleboard again.
Would you do it on a paddleboard again?
No. It's insane.
Oh, you've done that. You've been there and done that. Right, okay. Okay, next question. I'd like to hear how the guys are doing in respect to post-expedition blues. I seem to have more of a high when I come back, and it always changes my life in some way. This time I stopped biting my nails after 50 years, and that's from Duncan Holton, who also goes under the name of Flussmensch. What about post-expedition blues, guys? We did mention this in one of our previous sessions. Have you got? I mean, I know, Craig, you've got the documentary to keep you busy, but I wonder whether anyone had sort of experienced anything, and any advice for people coming back from a huge expedition like this.
Time. I think for me, to get the documentary side of thing, I think physically is an easy thing to track of how you're getting better. I know Skip and I have both got temporary nerve damage in our feet and our hands, so
just for the purposes of this particular question, because he mentioned biting his nails, I'm still in the process of losing 2 of my fingernails as well.
From paddle, yeah, exactly. So I think physical stuff you can kind of monitor the repair and how you're repairing, but I think the mental kind of recovery is strange. But I personally don't think I've quite processed it all quite yet, because there's all this noise. We're now doing these podcasts. It's great talking about it, but you kind of get to the finish line and you do something like this, and whether you spent 4 years building up to it or 6 months or whatever it might be, it's a massive life-changing event, and you're never quite sure how you're going to feel afterwards. And maybe afterwards, when you don't have this, if you don't have a big epiphany and a big kind of like, I'm going to change my life for the better and it's amazing, and I suddenly see things clearly like I did on the river, like Martin doing maths and me planning, you kind of almost like, it feels like a bit of a hangover. It's probably the best way to say. But I have no doubt that will get better and we'll start to really think about stuff. But I think it's a bit of a hangover right now.
Well, hopefully, Craig, you're thinking a little bit less about Martin and Kim than you were on the river. Living rent free in your brain for much of that race.
Yeah, no, exactly. But it's a strange thing. It's like I think as time goes on, we'll feel. Things will start to process, and it'd be amazing to think about what we've achieved, all of us.
I think, Can I just add to that as well? I think what's really interesting is that, the real moments where you start processing what happened or your experiences are when you meet up with your teammate or other people that have been through the same thing. And I don't think any of us have had much chance to do that. But I know from the couple of exchanges Craig and I have had face to face, it's the bit that makes me start to process things a bit more. And I think it is a journey to find out where this is ultimately going to end up taking us. But for me, feels incredibly positive, and I feel like I've achieved something.
Right, next question. So from Tony Chappell, I'm an armchair mountaineer and all-round adventure geek. I'm really interested when people try and climb a new route or a new mountain. Recently, I've really got into following the adventure side of SUP, thanks to SUP FM. Thanks, Tony. So my question to you is, what river, route or challenge would you like to attempt that's never been done before, and why? Craig and Skip, anything?
I've got one. Yeah, I've got one. Yeah. So you probably gathered by now that I'm not really a racer of paddleboards. I like paddling and I'm all right at it, but I like the adventure side of it more than the racing side of it. And a few years ago, I did quite a lot of paddling in Thailand, and I paddled the River Kwai. I call it the River Kwai. It's cool because the River Kwai is dick in Thai. And I've always harboured the thought that I want to paddle that river from the source to the sea, which on the rudimental research I did over the years, it's possible. So I think that might be the one for me. I think I was either the first or amongst the first to ever paddle a paddleboard under the bridge over the River Kwai.
Well, that's very cool indeed.
It's just something I'd like to do, and I've got some history there. I don't know whether it's ever been done. Will I have a look? Don't know whether I'm bothered about that.
Yeah, I'm going to have a look too.
Surprise.
I think we all are.
Martin, we're going to do it before he does it.
Oh, God, fair of you. I've got a bit of competitiveness in me.
Brilliant. Right, okay, we're going to get back to the lightning round now. So Box PR have asked, I'd love to ask about their refueling strategy. We've already touched on this, but how often and how much did they consume? Probably not enough by the weight loss, but what was the plan on that one?
Shall I go for this from a technical point of view?
Yeah. Not from me. No, you go for it.
No, I had a spreadsheet initially that had exactly the same stuff as Martin, and basically
went out the window.
All the plans fell apart, and it's like, well, it's the same with anything.
It worked for us, though, mate. It worked for us.
The thing is, it's like having a plan is great, but sometimes being able to execute it is the hard part. Knowing what you should do and doing what you should do are two very different things.
Well, there's a saying in the military that no plan outlasts the first contact with the enemy. So that's
is it Nigel? No, it's Chris Eubank, isn't it?
No, it's Mike Tyson. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. That's the other great one. Here we go. There's someone called Sup Junkie. I don't know whether anyone's heard of Sup Junkie.
No, I don't think I've heard of it.
But anyway, they've left a comment on Instagram and asked, I'd like to ask about leave no trace principles. Did everything get carried on the board?
Yes.
100%. Oh, yeah.
There you go. Yeah. Brilliant.
100%.
So
100%.
So there you go, Sup Junkie, whoever you are. That's that one answered for you. We've got a 3-part question here, so this is going to need to be a really quick answer. So this is from Holly Pie, and
hello, Holly.
And the first question is, what was something that you guys thought would be hard but was actually easy?
5 fingers.
Okay. So, what was something that you thought would be easy but was actually hard?
Flats.
Oh, you thought they were going to be easy? I never thought that. You thought they were going to be easy? Okay, I don't agree with that.
Okay. In fairness,
they told us a lot that were going to be hard.
Yeah, not quite as hard as it was.
Sleep deprivation.
Yeah.
Right? Sorry, that's the proper answer. Sleep deprivation,
without a doubt.
Yeah, I thought that'd be hard, but I actually got through that actually a lot easier than I thought I did.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then the final question, would you do it again?
Silence is golden. You know what, for me, if I could just say what I think, Craig, for a moment. For me, I don't know, because travelling the same stretch of river on any river is sometimes harder than the first time you do it, because you've kind of seen a lot of it. So that's the mental battle. I think the other side of the bridge might be interesting, but it sounds horrible. Yeah.
Well, Yukon 2000, you're not up for that one.
Well, I don't want to do the first 1,000 again. Yeah. Anyway, Craig, you?
No, I think the only thing that maybe interests me a little bit is maybe being one of the first people to do it on a paddleboard, a canoe, and a kayak.
Oh,
there you go.
3 times down the same stretch. You're a glutton for punishment, man.
I'm not saying I would do it.
There you go, Skip. Skip, I hope you're up for this.
No, I'm not.
Brilliant. Okay. So that's the questions there from our listeners. Craig, this season started with our chat at SUP 12. We're obviously really looking forward to the documentary. How are the plans for that? How's that progressing?
Really well. I think there's obviously logistical challenges getting lots of content from lots of people. But from what I've seen so far coming in and what the team have captured, I have the amazing opportunity to produce something so special. There's so many amazing stories. You know, you never know before a race like this whether you're going to get 17 teams and things are going to be just boring, but they're not. There's some amazing characters, amazing stories. Everyone's been on board. The tough challenge now is being able to turn that into something that is under an hour, unlike this podcast.
Yeah, we've run slightly over time here. Well, look, guys, that's it. I can't believe it's the end of the season. I just wanted to say a huge thank you for listening to all those who we connected with on social media, particularly while the race was on. Huge thanks, obviously, to John and to Petra and the whole Yukon 1000 race team. A special mention to Dan and Nick from Fortune Favours the Brave. And, of course, to you guys, Kim and Martin from the Renegade Moose Chasers, and Skip and Craig from Team Shac for letting us share your adventure with you.
Thank you too, Simon, for persevering with me in particular, because I'm terrible at technology. But thank you for allowing us to contribute to your show in such a lovely way.
Oh, amazing! It's been a real privilege. Take care, guys, and see you on the water. Maybe SUP 12.
Yukon 24. Come on, Simon.
Yeah, man, you've got to do it.
I got all the secrets, haven't I? I'm going to use them.
Yeah, and access to more if you need them.
Oh, there you go. Fantastic. Who could ask for more? Take care, guys.